here today. Welcome, Miko, to
Hi.
Startup School for Seniors. Great to have you. Miko is a web consultant, and God knows we all need one of those, especially when you're starting a business and thinking about your website. So let's just go right in there because I know that there's a lot of people in startup school who are thinking about building their website at the moment. They're looking at all the packages that are out there, things like Wix and Squarespace and WordPress. So from your experience, when you're first starting out, what's the first things that you really need to be thinking about?
So the very first thing you should think about before you do any writing or planning or designing or anything is your audience. And a lot of times customers or my clients say, oh, my audience is the public. And that's not an audience, because if you can't tailor your messaging and your offering to your specific niche audience, then you're going to struggle to compete. So that would be the first thing I would say. And then the second thing is to just really think about what makes you different from the others, because presumably there's going to be other people out there doing something similar to what you're doing. And it really helps if you can articulate in a clear and concise way through your website what makes you special or different. And only once you've got those things sorted out, then you can start thinking about things like what content I need to put into the website. And of course, that will vary depending on your audience, which is why your audience is so important. And then you can start thinking about things like design. And what tends to happen is a lot of people jump straight into the design stuff because that's the fun stuff. But really, that's the last step whenever you're planning a web project, especially if you're going to be doing it yourself.
And
So,
you say that most people these days can do it themselves?
yeah, I would say that you can, especially if you have, really limited needs in terms of complex functionality on your website. So really, there's kind of four main elements that go into making a website. One of them is the structure. That's the pages and how the pages are laid out. There's the content, and that includes images as well as text. And then there's the aesthetics, which is the colors and the fonts and things like that. And then there's the functionality. And that's things like buttons that people click on or adding to a shopping cart or things like that. And these days, quite a lot of the last two elements, the aesthetics and the functionality, can be kind of purchased off the shelf through one of the web builder software packages, similar to what you talked about earlier. And so, if you have fairly limited requirements in terms of, not needing complex search functionality or anything like that, then you can generally, use one of the web builders to at least make a fairly professional looking website on your own.
I know I've recently made a little website for my own portfolio using something called Card.
Uh-huh.
I've become very interested in this whole thing around no code. And I guess that started out a bit with WordPress and I guess blogging and things, and then went to Wix and Squarespace. But I've become quite well, I just think it's amazing now that there's so much that actually you can do and that looks good straight off the shelf without even having to think about most of the stuff that used to bother me years ago, such as where should the title go, or how do I get that to fit in that space and then shrink down. The thing that I did recently, I think it took me about 2 hours to build my website from scratch, and it was $19 a year. And so, yeah, I think that for me, learning that there's all this stuff out there has been great, but it seems like almost now there's too much stuff. So how do you differentiate these days between all of these kind of packages? We talked about Wix and Squarespace and WordPress. Are there any, especially in the early days, you would lean more to, or do you think they've all got something about them that's specific?
So they all have their quirks and their limitations. And the trick is to find the quirks and limitations that are the least problematic for you. Okay. So you're always going to have limitations with these systems because it's not like going to a tailor and commissioning a beautiful suit that fits you absolutely perfectly. You're buying something off the shelf, so you might have to compromise on fit, or maybe the pockets aren't where you want it to be, or something like that. Okay, so something like Card is great if you have really, really basic needs. It's basically an online calling card. It's a single page website. If you need anything more than a single page, then Card is not going to be right for you. If you need something a little bit more beefed up than that, something like Wix or Weebly or Squarespace, they're all great solutions that have really easy to use tools for the DIY person. They all have their limitations and they all have their special quirks, but they all also offer a free trial. So it may be worth, signing up with one, playing around with a little bit, seeing if it intuitively works for you. Because basically, your intuition and the designers who created the product, their intuition may be in a completely different place. So just see what feels comfortable. Now, I will give a little caveat here on WordPress. And the reason I'm doing that is because WordPress is a little bit different from the other offerings. WordPress is an open source software package. And what that means is that anybody has access to the code. And while that's great because it means there's lots of developers around the world who all contribute to WordPress, it also means lots of unscrupulous people have access to the code as well. So just be a little bit wary if you're looking at WordPress, especially if you're thinking about the installed version, which is the version that gives you all the flexibility, because quite a lot of people have issues with hacking, or there are also lots of issues with incompatibility. So with something like Card or Wix or Weebly or Squarespace, everything is all done by that company. So if something goes wrong, you know who to go to. With something like WordPress, their approach is slightly different, and Shopify follows the similar model, which is that WordPress or Shopify offer the core platform, which is the basic software that creates the website, but they allow third-party plugins. And all a plugin is a little bit of code that adapts the system to do something fancier than the basic system. And they also allow third-party designers to create the theme. So if you remember earlier, I was saying about the aesthetics and about the structure, those two elements are controlled by the theme. So that sets out the page layouts, and it also sets the colors and the relative size and shape of things and all of that. So instead of having WordPress designers or Shopify designers create the themes that control the look and feel of your website, they allow third-party developers to create their own themes. But there's a gotcha there because third-party developers may not be using the latest version of the code software, and you could run into compatibility issues. So I generally tend to recommend people steer clear of WordPress or Shopify. Very specific circumstances for Shopify would be applicable if you have specific e-commerce needs. But just because if there's a problem, it's a lot more complicated to figure out who's caused it and how to fix it and things like that.
That's a really good point. I know that I've struggled with some WordPress sites myself where the theme hasn't been updated. And as a result, when WordPress updates their site, the theme just breaks.
Yeah.
And there's no Ghostbusters. There's nobody to call. And you're just left with a broken theme. And that can be a complete and utter nightmare.
Yeah.
I think I've still got one site where I just don't bother updating it anymore because I'm so scared the thing's going to break that I just decided that it was actually not worth me worrying about. I'm just going to run it on a version that's probably 100 years old. Yeah, you talked about some of the other things with me before about extra things, for instance, like scheduling tools. I know that we've got quite a few people in the group that are personal trainers, are doing jobs for which having coaches as well for which having an online scheduling tool might be really useful. Is that something quite easy to implement?
Sure. So there's a few different approaches that you can take for that. If you happen to be using Squarespace, they have a built-in scheduling tool that comes as part of the package. It used to be a standalone product called Acuity Scheduling. So if you've ever used Acuity Scheduling before, it's the same product. It's just now fully integrated into the Squarespace system. So that makes it really easy to set up scheduling. There's also a couple of other tools out there. One that springs to mind is called Calendly, which is a really hard to say word, but they have a similar solution. And there's a few others that that also allow you to embed their third-party tool within your website. So you don't have to be limited necessarily by the platform that you choose for your website. So even if you have something like Wix, but you can embed a third-party calendar tool, then you can go ahead and do that. Just bear in mind that anytime the word embed comes up, sometimes people get a bit nervous because it sounds a bit scary, and it does mean copying and pasting a piece of code from one box into another box. So it is a little bit more, technical than just typing into a Word document, but it tends to be quite straightforward, and there tend to be help guides that help you do that. If you do want to use something like Calendly. Both Calendly and Acuity Scheduling or Squarespace Scheduling allow you to integrate multiple different calendars, and they allow you to have different calendar types, and they also allow you to take payment directly through that system. So if you need to offer bookings or packages of coaching or personal training sessions or boot camp or whatever, you can offer that payment through that system. Just bear in mind that they don't particularly work great if you're doing global services, because they don't integrate different tax brackets and tax rates and things like that. So if you are going to have to use, sell things globally, then it's worth using a pure e-commerce platform, because they will have the capability to add in taxes and shipping and all of that kind of stuff.
I think a lot of people don't think about that. And also, what about time zones? Does it take into account time zones? So if
It does.
offering coaching services.
It does, yeah. There's a time zone. You set your core calendar time zone, and then when the person books, there's a place for them to check their time zone and make sure that it's correct as well.
What's so amazing, isn't it, is that we live in a world now where I feel that the world of the web has been democratized for people that for whom many years ago all of this stuff would have been completely and utterly out of their reach cost wise. And as you just explained, you just take that little piece of code, you stick it in a box, and suddenly you've got a tool that allows you to schedule your work online, take payments online. Honestly, probably 5 years ago even, we would not have been able to do this sort of thing. So I think for a lot of people, it's probably quite a revelation when they hear that they can actually do some of this stuff that maybe they thought was just beyond their reach, was going to cost too much money. They were going to have to hire a developer. It was all going to start to look really expensive. What are some of the other myths that you think that are around about just having a website, building a website that you've heard, that you've come across?
Well, a lot of people do think that that they will only be able to make small changes themselves, and that they'll need to hire someone to do the majority of the work for them, which can often be the case. If you don't have a design eye, or if you're too busy running your business to have to want to learn how to use a fancy tool, then by all means, there are professionals out there that can help you with this. But I think a lot of times people think that, oh, well, I'll just get the content ready, and then I'll hand it over to somebody and they can do it all for me, which is still an approach that you can do if you don't want to do the DIY approach. But another thing that I think people often don't realize is that a majority of the time on a website project is spent before even opening any kind of website editor. So a majority of the time should be spent on preparing your content, right, making sure it's tailored for your audiences. When it comes to the design of your website, the aesthetics, a lot of times people think, oh, I want to like my website. And my answer is, you are not the customer. Your customers have to like your website. Your customers have to identify with the website. So if that means that it looks completely different than your personal taste, then so be it, which is, why it all goes back to identifying who your audiences are and making sure that they're satisfied. And then I would say the other myth is that, or the other, I guess, pitfall that people make is they think, I need to get this absolutely 100% perfect with every single thing in exactly the place that I want it to go before I click launch. And that is the single biggest mistake that people make. I have clients who spend 80% of the project time on the last 10% of the fine tuning. And really what we have to remember is that a website is designed to be a growing, living, evolving, changing thing. It's not like a brochure that you send off to the printer and it has to be perfect because once it's gone, it's, that's it. It's not like you're writing a book. It's something that's designed to change, and as your business grows and changes, your website can too. So it's better to get something out there that maybe you're 80% happy with or 75% happy with, because it's better to have something online than nothing. And I guess the final myth, I would say, this happens more now with the younger generation, is people who think, I don't need a website. I do everything on Instagram, so all I need is my Instagram website page. That can absolutely be a great tool for marketing your business. However, you don't have control over that. Instagram does, and Instagram only allows you to have, a very limited, profile, and it also doesn't allow you to have evergreen content, because once it falls off the Instagram page or the Facebook feed or the Twitter feed or whatever tool you're using in social media, it's gone, and people don't scroll back in time to find that one thing that they were looking for. So even if you just create a very basic website, it allows you to control your brand image online in a way that you can't do with social media, that creates a permanent, lasting presence that, nothing is, you can control and change whenever you want to.
I think that is such a good point, because I hear it so often that people say, oh, I'm on Instagram, as if that's it. That's all they need to do. And my biggest issue around that is not only that do you not control it, but if you do something that they don't like, they can just take it away. They can close you down.
They can, yeah.
They can literally do what they want. And I've seen people who have lost their entire social media channel, or it's been hacked, or somebody's copied them.
Yeah.
It seems to happen on Instagram with great frequency, especially around fashion,
yeah.
where somebody will see an outfit and then somebody else will copy it and basically almost replicate their entire feed and launch themselves as an identical brand.
Yeah, there's a lot of spoofing and all of that kind of stuff can happen. And also just bear in mind that you are subject to all of their terms and policies and everything like that. So creating your own website, you're in control of everything. And it also, especially for the slightly older generation, of which I am one, there's a certain sense of professionalism about having your own domain name and your own website. And also, it's nice to have a seamless experience. So your domain name and your email address and your Instagram and your Twitter handle are all branded and create a consistent experience, because that creates something that instills trust in people. And trust is a commodity that you can't really monetize, but it's absolutely critical to doing business online.
Completely agree. And One of the things that strikes me about now, as you say, thinking about updating your website and making it not quite perfect, is that one of the advantages with all these websites that I've seen is that you can keep testing new messages. You can keep looking at what's working. So from one week to the next, if you want to change the main message on your home screen, you just literally can go in and just change it. You don't
Yeah,
need help to do that. You don't need a developer. You don't need to recode anything. So as you say, the fun thing for me is kind of what they call A/B testing things
yep,
out. So one week you can do this message, the second week you can do another one, and you can see which sticks. So
yeah,
it's a great opportunity to look into, going back to the beginning, what is your key message? Who is your audience? Are you reaching those people in the way that they want to be reached? Are you talking to them in the language that they understand? And sometimes it takes a while to get that right. It doesn't always
absolutely.
happen first time. And the great advantage, again, of having your own website is being able to test all of that messaging and being able to change images if you want and update it with your latest products and do all of that sort of thing without having to go and seek a specialist out to help you. And it was not so long ago that you couldn't do any of that without having to ask for help. So, and I suspect that for a lot of people, especially older people, not all of them, because I don't like to put them in that bracket,
Yeah,
because I'm quite techie and my father's quite techie, but there's other people in my life that are not so techie, that it does vary from person to person how much they want to do this themselves or how much they want to seek help. Would your advice be check it out first yourself and see what you can do? How, or do you think, okay, if you need help, there's plenty of people out there who can help you? I sort of think, I don't know, it's difficult. I think for non-techie people, it still can be, even using Squarespace can be kind of a scary thing.
yeah. Well, I mean, I guess it really boils down to two things. Do you have the time and do you have the interest to do this yourself? If you have both of those things, then by all means go out there and play around, set up some free trials, learn the different systems. If either of those two things are missing, then it may be a better investment for you to spend some time letting someone who knows the ropes get you started or help you. So people like myself work with people in a number of different ways. There are people out there like me who do collaborative build sessions where we sit together in a session like this with a screen share and we build the website together. And the pro does all the pro stuff and the subject matter expert is the client and does all of that stuff. And then that can really shortcut the process. It also means that you would learn how to use the tool on the fly as you go, watching and learning while the person talks you through that. So that can be a really, really cost-effective way of doing it and shortcut some of the time involvement and initial learning curve required.
I think that's such a great idea, and I've never heard anybody do that before. So that's
Okay.
brilliant. And is there, when you look at costs of all of these things, is there a massive difference in cost between these kind of build-it-yourself websites, or are they all roughly the same?
There can be quite a substantial difference in cost, and a lot of times they will have a tiered pricing structure depending on what types of functions that you require. So for example, card is one of the really low end cost levels. I believe it's about $20 a year, and that includes your domain name. So your web address, for those of you who don't know. And that, like I said, is just for a single page, basic website. When you look at some of the other tools like Wix and Squarespace, their banding starts at around about $10 a month, but that gives you an unlimited access to the number of pages that you need to have on your website. It just has limitations on certain more complex functionality like e-commerce, which is available, but they will charge you a transaction fee. Whereas if you go for one of the slightly more pricier options, then you have no transaction fee. So you can, run e-commerce on the website without having to give somebody some cream off the top. Some of the other platforms limit different types of advanced content blocks that you can have. So, for example, map blocks or menu blocks or things like that that you can put into the page are limited unless you're on like one of the mid-level or higher plans. So it's worth thinking about what you need from the website. And then also, sometimes it's worth doing your sums. So if you do want to sell online or you want to take donations online, sometimes you think, oh, actually that 3% on top, I'll just charge 3% more for my clients, and then I don't have the larger monthly running cost. So it's sometimes worth just doing the math and figuring out what works. I will say that if you are thinking about e-commerce, Shopify is by far and away one of the most popular e-commerce platforms, but it's quite pricey. And a lot of the Shopify functionality is only available through third-party plugins. And unlike WordPress, where most of the plugins that you buy, you pay $35 or whatever, and that's it, almost all of the Shopify plugins are a rolling monthly fee. So you can very quickly start to add up over $100 a month just on running your website through Shopify. So watch out for those extra charges.
Wow, that's interesting. Actually, one of the main things, and we should have said it, probably talked about it right up at the front, lots of people I know have asked me things about just buying your web domain name.
Uh-huh.
I suspect a few people have been stung because they've gone to a web developer, said, I want to build a website. The web developer's gone off and bought the domain name. The web developer's gone off and bought all the packages, and the web developer is invoicing them every month for all of this kind of stuff that they don't own.
That's right.
So,
yeah.
And that used to happen quite a bit.
It did, yeah. I mean, luckily now almost all of the web platform, the website builders that we've talked about offer domain names through them. So you can purchase your domain name and your website's hosting subscription all through one place. Sometimes people purchase their domain names separately, and if that's the case, it's not a problem. You can always point or map your domain name to whatever different platform you're using. But always make sure that you're the one that owns the domain name. And if somebody's trying to charge you huge, monthly ongoing fees for some of this stuff, just watch out, because that's really not necessary. A domain name should be a one-time fee per year of around about somewhere between $5 and $20, depending on what the domain name is.
Yeah, and it's a really good point, because the more you can keep control of all of this yourself, the more, if you do need to hand it over to somebody for a bit of help, you're not going to somebody who's disappeared, which also I know has happened to a few people I know.
Yeah.
Their web developers went off and lived in Sri Lanka somewhere.
Yep.
And they don't know the logins. They don't have access to the control panels.
Yeah.
They don't know anything. And suddenly they've got to rebuild the whole thing from scratch.
With a different domain name as well, because they don't own that. Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's why all of the website platforms now, they tend to offer a fully integrated service. So, the subscription for the hosting and the access to the content management system or the tool that designs a website, plus the domain name, which is the web address, plus email. Very often they'll also offer email, which is, at that domain name, all through one integrated place. And that can tend to be a nice, safe, simple solution for people who are just getting started. So once again, they know exactly who to go to. It's only one password. It's only one login that they have to remember. So that can be a nice solution.
Very good point. I suspect that for many people, this has removed the fear, I'm hoping, of getting started and building their website. And hopefully they'll want to deep dive into looking at doing it themselves. But I know that you're very kindly giving us a template that we can use, and also some information about your courses, which will also run as well. So thank you so much. That's been really, really useful. Is there anything I've forgotten? Is there anything?
One final thing just to say is that to remember that with almost any web platform, the most important thing you should do on an ongoing basis is look at your statistics and your analytics so that you can make informed decisions that can help you not only decide what to do with your website, but also what to do with your business, because you can identify elements that are popular or not popular and then start to think about why is that. Is it that the wording on this page is wrong, or is it that this actual offering is not hitting the mark with my target audience? So your website can be a really, really powerful business intelligence tool. So don't forget to check your analytics. Once you've built it, it's not done. You got to keep checking and seeing what needs to be updated or changed or how you can switch direction.
Yeah. And do these packages have
They
integrated?
do, yes, most of them do. You can also install Google Analytics, but I will warn everyone that there is a massive learning curve on that. There are actually accreditation degrees just in Google Analytics. So you're probably better off starting with the ones that come integrated free with your software.
Great. Thanks so much. It's been fabulous talking to you, and we're looking forward to seeing everybody's websites.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. Thanks, Miko.
Okay. Bye.